first grader who just celebrated his 6th birthday planned to go to school in America today, but instead, his family held his funeral because he was murdered for being a Muslim. His name is Wadia Al-Fayoumi, a Palestinian-American boy living in a suburb of Chicago. Now, the family's landlord, 71 years old, is now accused of stabbing the young boy to death. Investigators say it was a hate crime, that the landlord targeted Wadia and his mother over the war in Israel. Everyone now, from President Biden to the Illinois governor, has condemned this attack. In one poignant quote, a local official says, "It's always the smallest coffins that are the heaviest." A neighbor says Wadia was playful, full of energy, and above all, innocent in all of this. It is a tragic statement about violent radicalism and the risk that this war will inflame tensions in unexpected places. Joining me now is Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a New York Democrat serving in the United States Congress. Congresswoman, thank you for being here. This is such a devastating tragedy, and this 6-year-old, he just had nothing to do with any of this. When you hear this kind of thing happening in the United States, what goes through your mind?
You know, I think one of the things that is so incredibly important for us to keep in mind as a country is that in times of such great geopolitical peril, we cannot allow the importation and the revival of bigotry and racism, of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia to really take root and bloom here in the United States. Right now, especially in New York City, there are also reports of Muslim, hijabi, also anti-Semitic attacks in Jewish places of worship as well. And it's extraordinarily important that we understand that a people are not associated with many of the political actors in this current situation.
I want to just ask you about some other news tonight. President Biden, of course, saying that on Wednesday he's going to Israel. I wonder, do you think that's a good idea, or are you concerned that that might inflame tensions in the region?
Well, I do believe that President Biden, especially with some of his most recent statements, has been playing a constructive role. The ability to acknowledge that we can condemn Hamas and go after and ensure that we target their operations, while also advocating for the protection and upholding of human rights in Gaza, in Israel, and beyond, and throughout the entire region. So our hope is that that stable presence can continue in the momentum of that direction.
And also at the same time, 2,000 troops being told to get ready to potentially deploy to the region. Is that something that you support the Defense Department doing?
You know, I know that, and I truly believe that it is in the interests of every single actor in this region to have a cooling of tensions here. I don't believe that any singular actor wants to see an escalation in violence, an escalation in the volatility of the situation. And I think what is most important is that we focus on the moves that are necessary to achieve that aim. And we know that Secretary Blinken's aim throughout the last several days have focused on that, and our hope is that the president's visit will as well.
I want to go back to something you just mentioned there about Hamas. As all of this kind of kicked off, you and several other of your colleagues released a statement calling for a ceasefire in the region. But I wonder, what is Israel supposed to do about Hamas after they murdered, brutalized, abducted over 1,000 of their citizens? Are they supposed to just do nothing?
Well, you know, I think what's important to note about a ceasefire is that it's not one-sided. Hamas has been sending thousands of rockets into Israel as well. And what is important is for us to identify our goal in terms of what safety means, in terms of what defense means.
But and if I may, Congresswoman, I think the position from Israel's perspective is that there was already an attack. And Hamas already committed an attack. After that happened, do you really believe that they should not respond to that?
I think what is important in terms of response is Israel does have a right to self-defense. I think what we need to take a look at in this situation is if collective punishment qualifies as defense, if the blockade on water, food, electricity, if the dropping of white phosphorus, which is an indiscriminate weapon, qualifies. So I do believe that there's a discussion to be had here. I don't believe that an either or approach is what is necessary, but we should identify what our goal is, which is the cooling of tensions in the region.
Israel's goal is to rid the region of Hamas. They've been very clear about that. And I certainly take what you're saying about the condition of Gaza right now for civilians who, as you point out, are not synonymous with Hamas. But for Israel to deal with Hamas, which is a force that is actually detrimental to Palestinians.
Absolutely.
How else are they supposed to address a violent, militant, some say terrorist group, other than to go in there and take them on directly?
Well, you know, when we talk about going in there, I think we should also keep in mind President Biden's statements as well about what the implications of a potential ground invasion would be. This is an inherently complex situation. I do believe that Hamas needs to be dealt with.
But how, I think, is what I'm trying to understand.
And I think what we're trying to figure out right now is that this present situation of collective punishment and indiscriminate attack is one approach, but we are seeing the issues and the complications with that approach now. Can we target them in terms of intelligence? Is there precision? What are the options available? Are entirely up to the administration and for Israel to examine and explore. But we need to center the fact as well that there are hostages in this region. There are Israeli hostages, American hostages. There are innocent Palestinians. About 1,000 children have died so far in these attacks. And I think we need to have a conversation about what that how looks like, because we've seen what the impacts of that have been so far. And we have to try to, I believe, in such a complex situation, thread that needle in a time when there's so much opposition to nuance.
One of the other factors in this, a couple of years ago, there was a vote in Congress for funding for the Iron Dome. And you very publicly were torn, even emotional about your vote, which ultimately was present. You put out a statement saying that you opposed Iron Dome funding. I wonder, given everything that we've seen in this last week, the Iron Dome has essentially intercepted thousands of rockets from Hamas. Do you believe now that funding is essential? Would you vote for it today?
And to be clear, at that time, I had voted present on the Iron Dome funding because of what we had seen previously that year in terms of Netanyahu's decisions, which also resulted in the bombing of several buildings that contain media agencies, civilian targets. However, I do think that in this present moment, when we discuss support for Israeli defense systems, that is absolutely legitimate. I think it is absolutely something that whose support we can. So
you would vote yes today if it came to the United States Congress, additional funding for the Iron Dome?
I think if it was explicitly around that. I have concerns about white phosphorus. I have concerns about the respect for about human rights and ensuring that we have humanitarian aid going through. But on the sole principle of Iron Dome and defense, I absolutely think there's an openness for sure.
I want to get you to respond to something that a Republican candidate for President Ron DeSantis said about the potential for refugees from Gaza. Just take a listen.
And I don't know what Biden's going to do, but we cannot accept people from Gaza into this country as refugees. I am not going to do that. If you look at how they behave, not all of them are Hamas, but they are all anti-Semitic. None of them believe in Israel's right to exist.
There's a lot in there, but I wonder for you, is he touching on something that is perhaps real here? Should Arab countries be taking on the lion's share of the burden to absorb what could be over 1 million, if not more, refugees from Gaza?
I think there's something to be said about the region's partners being able to support and step up Palestinians. However, that does not abdicate the United States from our historic role that we've played in the world of accepting refugees and allowing people to restart their lives here. And I also want to address something very specific about what Governor DeSantis said when he said, quote unquote, all Gazans are anti-Semitic. how incredibly destructive and dangerous that rhetoric is. We just had a 6-year-old boy stabbed 26 times this morning because of rhetoric like that. And it is dangerous, it is unacceptable, it is reckless, and no leader in the United States of America should be amplifying a message like that.
Congresswoman, back in Washington, where I think you're headed tomorrow, there's a big speaker's race heating up. Jim Jordan looks to be the person who Republicans will put up for a vote. You joined in all Democrats in voting to get rid of Kevin McCarthy. Any regrets if Jim Jordan is the man who replaces him?
No. It has never been truly within the integrity and history of this institution for one party to elect another party's member as speaker. We'll see if Jim Jordan has the votes. We'll see if individuals like Mike Lawler or Mark Molinaro, who represent New Yorkers in Hudson Valley, the Catskills, Westchester County, will actually vote to install a man who voted to overturn the United States' election and who supports a national abortion ban to be Speaker of the House and second in line to the presidency. I have my doubts that the people of New York would really stand for that. But in terms of the integrity of the institution, I think it's important that we support Hakeem Jeffries for Speaker of the House.
Is Jim Jordan a better or a worse alternative to Kevin McCarthy?
It's difficult to say. Kevin McCarthy clearly eroded the institution. He held the entire U.S. economy hostage with the debt limit. He then went back on his word and his deal with the president in doing that. It was Kevin McCarthy that installed this and ultimately made the call for a one-person motion to vacate that led us into this mess to begin with. So it's difficult to say. But I do believe that the entire Republican Party has an institution problem and that they have driven the entire country to the brink in this incredibly sensitive moment.
All right, Congresswoman, we'll see what happens tomorrow. We appreciate you coming into the studio for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.